Let me first say that I'm not out to prove that there isn't any good leftist art or that leftists make bad art. No. A lot of leftists create amazing art, and certainly better than mine. This is more of a critique of the forces that I see holding art back in leftist spaces. There are three main sentiments, which I consider specifically leftist, that are antagonistic to creativity. The first has a historical precedent, and that is the demand for art to be strictly utilitarian, didactic, and moralizing. Here I'm going to reference and highly recommend Angie Speak's video, Dadaism, Art as a Political Weapon. One thing that I found particularly enlightening from that video was the debate over the role of art in revolutionary politics, or vice versa. To sum it up as best I can, there was a line of thinking among the French revolutionary communists that art should solely serve the aims of communism, basically rejecting the subjective in favor of the utilitarian. The same line of reasoning is being used today in leftist spaces, albeit not consciously. I see this criticism thrown at the larger, more artistically inclined BreadTubers that they are either too culturally focused or don't promote Marxism enough. But creating the kind of leftist art that would satisfy revolutionary leftists seems like a very difficult task. Either the art is too artsy and not informational enough, or it's solely informational and not art anymore. Many smaller BreadTubers have decided that art isn't the same as the act of organizing or like doing the real thing that causes revolution, whatever that is. And so anything that remotely resembles leftist art is judged as lacking based on the fact that it is art and not direct action.
Meanwhile, Contrapoints is a self-indulgent intellectual project that's been pursued, like most of these other projects, as a means of a career, not to serve any overarching goal. And that's an important distinction. New Left media is, ultimately, entertainment, products, commodities, and while the creators deserve to be compensated for their work, the fact that some of them are raking in millions and hundreds of thousands of dollars, while radical projects and organizations with real impacts on the world struggle to make ends meet, it doesn't sit right with me.
There is no room for the deeply personal, or else you're just being self-indulgent. By God, Contrapoints, you have 1 million fans. You need to use your platform to shepherd the sheeple. Be leftist Jesus, goddammit. It's ironic because leftists will criticize capitalism for destroying art in a similar fashion by sacrificing the artist's personal vision for the sake of what is appropriate or appealing to the masses. The paradox is that many leftists will look at fairly apolitical mass-produced art and see a revolutionary queer communist masterpiece. While if you create art like Contrapoints does that has more explicitly leftist politics, they bitch and moan that it's not radical enough and pays too much attention to how it looks. Which brings me to the second point, that there is a mixture of a distrust of beauty, probably reflective of Dadaism, and a distrust of the wealth that funds the art.
From the very beginning, 100 years ago, radical avant-garde, and this was all theorized by Theodor Adorno, distrust beauty. Beauty became ideological, a conformist idea. It must be in music, atonality, dissonance, painting must not be beautiful, and so on and so on.
Maybe I'm hanging out on the wrong side of BreadTube, forgive me if I am, but I've seen a fair number of people criticize Natalie for spending too much money on her videos, calling them overly decadent and wasteful, and saying she pays too much attention to style rather than substance. Despite the fact that she has openly invited the commie cat girls to guillotine her in her video Opulence, the content of which got lost under the shadow of the drama surrounding it, they still unironically fault her for her wealth and glamour. It's like a Protestant suspicion of beautiful imagery in favor of true piety, or in this case, true praxis. Anything pretty, popular, and expensive is bourgeois trash. It's not real. Only obscure poor people art is the real thing. All real artists starve. True freedom is subversive. True art rejects the status quo. But again, going back to the paradox I mentioned, the even more expensive mainstream centrist art that these leftists love and celebrate are not judged by the same standard. It's rather odd. But jumping ahead now, this last force that is detrimental to art is something I find to be a new phenomenon, probably having its roots in feminism rather than communism. That is, sensitivity and the need for a safe space and validation. After her video The Aesthetic, people have expressed disappointment that Natalie didn't do enough to make Tabby the obvious winner against Justine, and many said the video exacerbated their internalized transphobia. In a sense, Natalie is often expected to create art that functions more like media made for very small children. Absolutely safe, purely optimistic, and didactic or informational. Natalie doesn't appear to want to do this, and she's complained about the expectation of her work to be a safe space before. In The Aesthetic, Natalie didn't create a form of validation, she captured her own psyche. In leftist spaces, if you're making something about trans issues that doesn't clearly signal an explicit form of validation, it becomes a problem. You are expected to make content that validates, especially if you've been labeled as a type of heroic figure that people look up to. But what if you don't want to be a hero for a second? You just want to be an artist? Are you not allowed to be that anymore just because you have a large audience? There's a lot of talk about parasocial relationships, and I think there is something to be said about the danger of relying on a public figure to heal you or change you or make you feel a certain way about yourself. An artist can express how they feel, which can result in you seeing that and feeling less alone, which is always great, but it's ultimately not their responsibility to validate you. That can't be anyone's responsibility but your own. Both the demand for didactics and comfy, safe validation greatly limit the artist's freedom of expression. It narrows down the forms of acceptable art to a stricter set of elements. Combine that with the view that popular influencers have a responsibility to use their platform for a specific set of goals, and you have a very confined and stressed out artist. But anyway, I think I've said enough. I've spoken a lot about how leftist attitudes have influenced art, but I did omit the discussion about how changing material conditions would affect art. That's another big discussion, so maybe next time. If you disagree with what I've said, feel free to chew me out in the comments. Thanks for listening. Bye.